a sign to make a change. Among the platform crowd, words clear as clouds, say you can't remain the same. Yet familiar voices cry my name. I'm on the last train home. On the last train home.
Today, I'm joined by legendary vocalist John Bush of Armored Saint. The band's upcoming ninth studio album, Emotion Factory Reset, is scheduled for release May 22 through Metal Blade Records and features the powerful single Close to the Bone. Following 2020's Punching the Sky, the new material feels emotionally intense, reflective, and psychologically charged, balancing pressure, frustration, ambition, conflict, and renewal in a way that feels very human underneath the heaviness. John, thank you for taking the time. Welcome.
Well, that was very well written there and created. Good
Thanks.
job. Very, very uh, well put. Thank you so much.
Liz sent me over your tracks or whatever, and they kicked ass, dude.
Well, we're excited. We are proud of our record. It's we feel like we keep doing good stuff here as we age. We're
Yeah.
like a fine wine, and yeah, it's real important for us to make modern new music that we feel like it can stand on its own. It can compare with what we did in the 80s. It could maybe surpass it. I mean, again, it comes down to the listener, and the listener kind of makes the final decision about things. We could sit here and we can endorse it and sell it as much as we want. But in the end, it's the listeners that hear it and they give you their thoughts. And usually people are pretty favorable.
I really enjoyed it. I could literally just close my eyes and think that I was listening to you back in the 80s, your voice. I mean, your voice fucking kicks ass, dude. I can't believe how good you sound at this age.
That's understandable.
It sounds very blues oriented as opposed to like thrash metal back in the day, but it's still got an amazing vibe to it.
Yeah, well, it's really all three of those guys. It's Jeff, it's Phil, and it's also Joey, who's kind of the orchestrator of it all.
Yeah.
And Gonzo's an awesome drummer, and Joey and Gonzo have a great rhythm tandem. They're just a cool groove thing that they always got. But yeah, I mean, look, we're a metal band, we're a hard rock band, of course, but we always kind of are going to be rooted in the bluesy, soulful style of the groups that have influenced us, and even bands that were not metal bands, R&B bands, and anything that could kind of just inspire us. Sometimes it was jazz fusion, you name it. But we always kind of take all those influences and throw them in a pot and mix it up, and then really channel it through Armored Saint and our own personal personalities and let those things go through. And as a singer, I just kind of it took me a while to kind of find my niche, but it was just really about kind of creating my own unique sound and style, and that's really, I don't know what kind of octaves I have. I don't know any of that malarkey. I just know that I try to sound soulful and powerful. But yeah, to keep doing it all these years later, we're lucky. We really are.
Yeah, that's beautiful, man, to have that longevity like that. After Punching the Sky, what felt creatively unfinished or unresolved that ultimately led into Emotion Factory Reset, if anything at all?
I don't think anything was unfinished at all. I kind of think we look at every record as just a new record, and writing new material and kind of maybe expanding a little bit on what we've done. But I also think that every record is just is I always say it's kind of that's exactly what it is. It's a record of time, and that's where you're at that time, and your mindset and what you're thinking about and what you're going through personally, and perhaps collectively as a group, and all the things that you're experiencing as a human being during that time. And then you kind of go into music, you make music, and then you hopefully it kind of demonstrates a progression of when you look back. I think it's all just kind of progression. I love Punching the Sky. I think it was a great record. It came out when COVID did, so it was kind of unusual and a weird time for all of us, for everybody. But this is just 6 years later, and all the experiences we had. We did a lot of touring in the last 6 years, probably more than Armored Saints done in years, and that probably had an effect in some capacity, maybe just as a live band. I don't really know, but like I said, we don't really think about it too much other than the fact of like, let's just keep growing. And that's the way I see it.
It's of the era or the time that you're basically involved, and that's a reflection of your music, most
Yeah.
generally, you know.
We're a band from the 80s and of course people love a lot of the stuff we did in the 80s and I love it, you know. But I don't want to go back to the 80s. I don't want to look back and go, okay, can we redo March of the Saint? Just like Metallica shouldn't attempt to redo Ride the Lightning. You just
Yeah.
can't. You know, you were a young kid, you were just a different mindset. So you can take a lot of those inspirations and influences of the time and maybe even look back and go, this worked, this didn't kind of thing. But the last thing I want to do is like look backwards and go, how can we do what we did then now?
Yeah.
I think that's a big mistake. And quite frankly, I don't want to do that. You know, I just want to keep growing. But, you know, like I said, the foundation of what we are is never going to leave. That's always going to be there. And that's, you know, we don't really veer from the reality of what kind of style of a band we are. A bluesy hard rock band, heavy metal band, and we try to just do it with the most sophistication that we can and convincing music and songwriting. So, you know, we're pretty like a lot of bands, we're probably our harshest critics. So, you know, if it can't past us, then we feel like it's good enough for the public.
What I listened to sounded very mature, you know, as a band, you know, it sounded
Right.
very,
Which could be, you could laugh at that a little bit because
yeah.
we were young and I was 21, 22 making those March of Saint till there was no red records. Probably it was the last thing I would want somebody to tell me is that I was mature. You know what I mean? I know what you're saying, but it's funny because I would think by, you know, again, we were kids. We were so lucky we started so young, but, you know, we were probably, if I knew somebody who was like in his mid 30s, I would think that guy's so old. You
Mm.
know,
Yeah,
That-
true. Yeah.
so, and I get probably how young bands feel that way now. They probably look at, older bands of like, man, that guy's old, let alone 60, right? That's it's insane. But this is what it is. You know, it's funny because blues artists, like some jazz artists, I think they're revered when they're older. But for
Yeah.
some reason, I think rock artists kind of people look down a little bit sometimes, and they think, oh, their past is is way better, and they're past their prime, and I don't think we give the love that we should to rock and roll artists as much as like people in other genres do. Um, and I get it because especially heavy metal and hard rock, it's a physical thing. It's like being on a sports team. It's
Yeah.
a young man's game, quite frankly, because it takes a lot of energy. You got to be fit. You got to be have that enthusiasm, and it's usually associated with people who are younger. And I get it, but if you're somebody who still has something to say and you can say it well and you can say it convincingly, then keep going because why not?
I think I honestly have a different perspective on that actually,
Tell
because
me.
I think that, you know, a lot of the younger bands look up to guys like you. And, you know, because you guys, you know, set the foundation for what everybody does, you know, like metal, like Metallica. I mean, Metallica's still going strong. You guys are still going strong, obviously, coming out with a new album. And, you know, I think that it's more of an inspiration to the younger artists that,
I think you are right. I think and I'm not like some bitter guy at
yeah,
all. So
right.
don't get me wrong. But I think it's more revered now than it was. Like say maybe here's an example. I remember when I was in Anthrax in the '90s, and I felt that way a little bit, and I think we all did maybe a little bit.
Yeah,
I'm speaking for them then. And at that point, I mean, and it was '90s, so it was 30 years
yeah,
ago, right? So at that point, even Anthrax was as looked at as an older band, and we were pretty young still, quite younger
my
than
God, he's 30 years old.
I mean, God, But I think maybe at that point it was perceived a little different. Now I
Yeah.
agree with you. I think people are a lot more respectful of older artists, and um, it doesn't feel quite the same as it did. And don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm grateful every day for just being able to make music, let alone if anyone is turned on by it. But And I don't want to, like I said, come off as I'm like some curmudgeon at all. But yeah, uh, I hopefully it's inspirational to anyone of any age.
My daughter, she's 21, and she absolutely loves bands like Metallica, and you guys. It's crazy that she's listening to stuff that I listened to when I was like 16.
Well, I
That's
mean,
an
dude, when
example.
I was my brother turned me on to Sabbath and Zeppelin when I was like 9 years old, playing it for me. Um, and he was like, what, like he's 7 years older than me, so he was not too much older, but he was certainly older. And the reality is that you're always going to look back on this older music and get inspiration from it. I'm always going to feel like, oh, the bands from the 70s were the best.
Yeah.
But I think it's really important to listen to a lot of new music too, because I don't want to be some old fuddy-duddy guy going, oh, it's only better in the 80s, this
Yeah.
stuff. But you know what, again, and I was listening to that. And actually, it's funny because a lot of that stuff I still love, whatever, as far as like crooners and I mean, what amazing singers, right? Dean Martin. I mean, no one's better than
Yeah.
Frank. So
Frank.
you
Yep.
can always find it's music. And you're always going to connect with the bands that you're growing up with at that time. Like you say, like the Metallicas and, the bands that as you're kind of growing up and discovering music, that's going to be the fun time of your life. But it's music. So to me, it's really important to listen to all music it doesn't matter what year it's from. And, it's all there for the taking.
Is there anybody more recent that you actually like, in music today that inspires you? The reason why my daughter likes the older music is because she thinks that a lot of the newer music sucks.
Why does she
Seriously.
think that? Why does she think that? Because does she explain why?
No, not really. I mean, she's
Okay.
autistic, but
Okay.
she doesn't really explain as to why. But maybe that's what just moves her more as the older.
I think one drawback from a lot of modern music, if I was being critical, is that sometimes it just sounds sterile because, especially the way things are recorded. Pro Tools is an awesome
Yeah,
tool, and we use it obviously because it's very helpful. At the same time, it could sometimes make music sound sterile because if you're not really playing live, you're not really recording things as a whole. If you're just taking sections of songs and putting it together and I think that sometimes you lose the breath of music. I welcome mistakes at this point. I really do because it feels real, and sometimes you will have a tempo change and sometimes you may hit a funky note guitar-wise vocally and oh, that sounds wrong or it sounds, out of tune, but yet it sounds live. And so I think that sometimes a lot of modern music sounds like that, whether it's metal, some metal artists, pop artists. I think a lot of it sounds that way. So that, that's something that I personally struggle with. But there's some great, rock artists that are doing some really inventive stuff. That band Rivers of Nihil on Metal Blade, bringing in a saxophone in like a death metal band, that's really unheard of. So it was very inventive. And there's a lot of great R&B singers, guys like Leon Bridges who sounds really, really cool. He's a kind of a throwback singer, in my opinion. There's Rodrigo and Gabriel. I mean, these guys aren't new, but they're doing really cool stuff with that, influenced by metal, but like kind of doing in their Spanish way, which just two guitar players, and they're incredibly talented. So, I mean, I love this band, King Gizzard and Lizard Wizard. Of course, they're not new either. They've been around a long time now, but they're really, really cool and inventive. So I think there's a lot of different music out there. And I'm always wanting to discover new things because I don't want to be somebody who, like I said earlier, is like it's only good then
yeah.
because it's just not true. Because quite frankly, as much as I love bands from the 70s and 80s, there was a lot of crap back then too, in all honesty. So you got to always sift through it and find what connects to you. But I think that that is the one thing that sometimes is missing in modern music. And I think it's probably due to technology is one of the drawbacks. You could use it and you should use it, but you got to be careful because you don't want music to start sounding sterile.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you there. How did you guys approach recording your new album? Did you use Pro Tools? Was it live? Did you use analog? I mean, obviously
Yeah.
there's the tools that you have right now that are make it much more convenient, but based on that, obviously Yeah, but your perspective on, the music becoming sterile, how did you prevent that from happening with this album?
Well, what we do is we do have a template that we use that Joey makes these really cool, even no matter how the song gets finished, arranged, as far as like I said, the arrangement and stuff. We end up making demos, and then we work from the demo, which is not that different from what we did even in the 80s. In the 80s, it was just on a Fostex 4-track. You were always scared if that cassette got tangled up because then you basically lose your main
Yeah,
copy of the song. But it's not that different. We used to make cool, elaborate demos as much as we could in the 80s, and now we just do it a little bit more sophisticated using Pro Tools. But Joey has a really cool system, and he has a great home studio, and he makes these really great, elaborate demos that sound awesome, that are fun to work with. So I'll go back and work on the vocals and take ideas from wherever they come from, other guys, others, whatever it is, and then write lyrics, and then I'll go to his house and sing. And then from those demos, we try to maintain a lot of the vocals from those versions because I'm in the mindset that sometimes some of those vocal performances, the first ones that you do are sometimes the best ones. Surely, sometimes you hear things and go, okay, let's change that. I think it could be better. And then you redo things. Or sometimes we are trying to get it done in a hurry. And then you think, okay, well, that's just out of tune. And like it is making you like go, and when you hear it. So let's correct that because otherwise it's out of tune, right? So, but we keep a lot of those demos. And then what will happen is that then Joey will send it to Gonzo, and Gonzo will kind of play to the demo. Of course, he'll create his own thing from it, his own chops, and but we'll use that template, especially as a click, because it's just easier to create from that. But everybody comes in, everybody kind of contributes their parts, their guitar playing. Joey goes back sometimes and redoes the bass. And then we'll just kind of grow from that original template. But we don't, the last thing we want to do is use it in a way where again it can feel like it's not breathing and it's not like feel like a whole band is performing. So yes, it is different from how stuff was done in the 80s, but there was always layering even in the 80s. That you do a drum track and then you put the bass on and then you put the guitars. Probably the 80s was really the beginning of bands doing things separately. um, look, I mean, we went to the Motown Museum and it was great in there in Detroit where you literally see, baffles in one room where there's drums, a baffle, the bass, the guitar, singing, and everyone's in there performing live. And so many of those songs were actually recorded that way,
yeah,
which is just incredible, really, right? But it's just not really done like that. And it hasn't for a long time. But again, if you could use these methods, but still do it in a way where you know that the music feels connected and
yeah,
everybody is doing their thing. I think that's the key thing. And it's a struggle more than ever, as I said, not to be redundant, but I think that's the really important thing. You have this technology, but you don't want to overuse it. And
yeah.
that's probably beyond music. I mean, that's going to be something that we're challenged with as people in various ways, of course, through AI, you name it.
I went to Musicians Institute for music production, and there's so many different methods and so many tools and so much technology that you can use to make everything sound perfect. You're absolutely right that it can sound sterile.
Yeah.
You can overprocess it, overcompress, and it's a hard balance to decide on which tools to use, which not to use, and whether to keep it simple or whatever. Especially with all the plugins that are out there now, and then you have auto tune,
Right.
which I don't remember Rob Halford relying on auto tune,
You're
or
right.
yeah,
No,
seriously,
no. And then like Plant, would
Robert Plant, yeah,
benefit from some auto tune sometimes, but again, felt real and yeah, you're a singer.
organic,
Sometimes,
yeah,
yes,
it's got to
yeah. Yeah. So, again, it's a fine line. I mean, some people like the way auto tune sounds. Like there's artists that actually use that as their trip,
yeah.
so that's weird. My son sometimes listens to something and he kind of likes it. I'm like, wait, what? I don't know. The note is being altered, but I don't know, whatever. I mean, who am I to say? Again, it's music, and I guess as long as you like music, that's better than not liking music.
Yeah, true. Listening through several of the new tracks,
Okay.
there seems to be a recurring emotional thread running beneath the album. There's tension, pressure, survival, internal conflict, transformation. Even though the songs each have their own identity, they still feel connected psychologically. Now, as the writing developed, did the album gradually reveal its own emotional personality to the band?
I think again, it's for me, it's a lot of it just personal things that I'm feeling, and then way to try to kind of connect to listeners who are not me, of course, and maybe speak, for lack of a better way of explaining it, in their way. So using ideas and stories and feelings that I have about things, but trying to do it in a way where the listener can reflect
Right.
and kind of feel their own way. So take the song Buckeye, for example. That was a personal song, probably the most personal one on the record. It's one of the first songs we wrote. I wrote it about when my daughter was moving to college, leaving home, and the feelings I had about it, and being proud and being, sad at the same time. So it's a way to kind of, uh, uh, that's how I felt, but I didn't want, not everyone's going to be in that position, obviously. So I was trying to write in a way where somebody as a listener might be feeling those same kind of feelings of like, of loss or of distance or, or being proud and at the same time sad. So whatever it is, because everyone feels these emotions in different ways. So that's one example. I think that it's impossible to not, look around the world and see how things are developing with people's perspectives and division and things that are going on. And how does that play out in conjunction with maybe a riff? And I'm always as time has gone on, I think I've always written things with a slight kind of wink and a smile, but um, I like being sarcastic sometimes. I like adding a little sense of humor amongst things. Not always, depending on the song, of course. Um, but kind of playing into the way that society sees things. Right now is a funny time because I think I was writing and when I was writing, thinking I was answering these questions first. Um, is that, everyone's a know-it-all. It's so funny. Like, when did that happen? I think people believe in what they think, but I mean, we really are a society now where everybody knows all the answers. And it's like, I mean, really, you don't know anything. Like, the reality is people probably know very little about all this stuff that's going on, but yet everyone's an expert. And it's so funny to me. But, and I get caught up in it too, I do. But
So,
it's just, it's just so weird. It's like, when did you become, some expert in military, warfare? Like, how do you don't know anything? You're like people, serve in the military for 30 years to learn this stuff. And then all of a sudden, some guy on his email is like sending some post to Yahoo saying well, everything that he knows about that. It's like you don't know anything. You work at like Costco. Like, what are you talking about? So I don't know. I mean, I'm not putting anyone down per se, but it's just funny. It's like we live in this world, and I get caught up in it too, going, well, no, that's not true. And anyway, so all those kind of things play in a little bit to my perspective on lyrics because I like to kind of add a little sarcasm when necessary.
yeah, is that now more of a personal thing that you would be aware of, or do you think it's obvious to other people that it's sarcasm?
I don't want to tell people what to think because, I'm still trying to figure it out. And sometimes my opinion changes about stuff. So it's more about the feelings at the time and raising questions and then trying to find amusing ways to say things and kind of subliminal, even going back to the song Aftermath and writing about nuclear warfare, which was this is mid 80s. It was a
Yeah,
different time and we could still kind of
but
connect
we're
to
still kind of
it's
dealing with
rel
that right now.
it's relate yeah, it's relatable now, but the idea of somebody in a missile silo and the tension of saying I might be the guy who has to send a missile and that was the inspiration for that song then, and a lot of it was just inner turmoil, right? There was a theme behind it, but it was still the inner turmoil of somebody feeling like they had a job to do, but their job might annihilate people. So, these are the emotions that I think is interesting when it comes to writing lyrics and songs, and it makes it easy to belt that stuff out live because you can connect in the terms of just feeling how it makes you feel
You
and
personally
emotionally.
have to connect to what you're singing.
Yeah, so and that makes me want to be like an emotional singer because when it comes to singing, whether it's something aggressive or something soft or um, whatever it is, you still want to be convincing in the way you deliver it.
Well, you definitely do a great job delivering, that's for sure.
Thank you, brother.
Can you deliver?
Hey, that's right.
Yeah, I love that tune, man. When that first came out. But you still sound the same, like I said. That it blows my
Well,
fucking mind.
that's very nice. It's funny when people tell me that because when I listen back on like March of the Sane, Delirious Nomad, even Raising Fear, which I was singing so high on that record, um, I just sound so young. Now of course I'm older, but and I've kind of learned to sing in this particular mid-range where it's easier and it's also warmer sounding. So it took, like I said, it took a while to kind of really deliver. I mean, develop my own vocal particular style, but it's about sounding unique. I think that's the most important thing. The last thing I want to do is sound like anybody else.
Yeah,
So kind of it's my thing. That's really the way I look at it.
I think that's missing a lot personally these days. That it's so hard to sound unique and individual.
It
And,
is.
and a lot of the stuff that I listen to, it sounds like the same band.
Yeah.
Maybe, biased a little bit, but I found that Spotify puts up about 60,000 songs a day. You literally have to sift through all the fucking garbage just to get to the good stuff. And that gets frustrating because
Yeah.
there's bands like you guys that are producing some amazing music, and sometimes it gets sidelined for garbage. I have a very hard time trying to relate to the music industry right now. And
Well, it's always been like that in all honesty. I mean, nobody said this is a fair world, in any walk of life, right? So, but especially the music business. So I think, you have to do it for the reasons that are genuine, and that's because you really like making music. And if your primary objective is fame, the likelihood is pretty good that you won't achieve that. That's the reality. So, granted, when we were young, we felt that way too. And we had so much bravado. And the first guy that we met who signed us to our first record, not Brian Slagle, but the guy who signed us to Chrysalis Records, we met him in the studio and he was we didn't know him. And he told us that he was a record exec and told us about some other band he was interested in. I won't mention names, but we were like, they suck. They suck. That band sucks. We'll blow them away. And we were, we were nobody. We were like 19-year-olds guys who probably had done about 10 to 15 shows at that point, maybe. And but we had this attitude and we thought we were the bee's knees kind of thing. I think that people feel that way. And then if you're able to put out this music, you might as well utilize it and do it as much as you can, because you have that ability now with Spotify and various things. You automatically go from a local band to a global band immediately, which is cool. There's a lot of people out there, but the quality is probably is not that broad. So you got to find it and you got to look for it, or just find things that at least tap into you. There's no real rhyme or reason when it comes to this stuff. I mean, as long as it connects, I think that's the key thing. There's that band, The Who, a Mongolian band. They're really cool. They're doing some really cool, inventive stuff. Some of their stuff is in, I think, their native language. Again, as long as there's a way that it connects to you as a listener, I think that's the most important thing.
well, that's what music's all about, right?
Yeah.
Close to the Bone immediately grabbed me because of the emotional pressure running through it. The lyrics feel claustrophobic, like someone trying to maintain control while internally spiraling. While musically, the tension keeps building underneath the surface. What inspired that emotional atmosphere behind this?
It was funny because Tracy, Joey's wife, Tracy Vera from Metal Blade, head of the label, she was telling Joey that he personally keeps things probably close to the vest, that's the term, close to the bone, like kind of hold
Yeah.
stuff in. Um, and so we were just talking about it one day amongst, a conversation, really, maybe over dinner or something. And so they kept saying that, and Joey kept going, we should use that as a title. And I was like, okay, let's do it. So um, kind of ran with that kind of slight premise, but then I started thinking about how it is when you have to work with people that sometimes you don't see eye to eye with, right? Whether that's in a band or whether that's in a factory or whatever line of work it is, or you're on your beer league, hockey league game team, or whatever, whatever it is, where you just have to coincide in a situation where you don't really see eye to eye with people. And how do you do that? Because you can lose your mind. And get very frustrated, or you can find ways to make it work. And so that was the general kind of thought behind that song lyrically. Because I took the title and I thought, I guess, if you keep it close to the bone, you're not really giving yourself the opportunity to work with somebody, even if you don't see eye to eye. So that's kind of something that I think that's something that people deal with every day, right? So
House.
yeah, so that's kind of was the idea behind it. It's a cool song because it has these two bridge parts. We made a conscious effort to try to make the songs a little more concise. We like writing long songs sometimes, but the label was saying, "Hey man, can you try to like write some shorter tunes?" And we're like, "Okay, let's do that. Let's make a conscious effort to maybe make a song feel like a long song." But technically it's not. So, which is not easy to do. So that's what one of the goals of this record was to do that musically. And that song does it. It has, verse, B section, chorus, but it has these two bridge parts, it has the lead in it, which is like a double lead. So it's kind of got everything. And it's still not 10 minutes long. So, which is an achievement for Armored Saint. So that's the kind of thing behind that song. Plus, it felt like the first song on the record. It just had that feeling.
You guys have been together for at least 40 years, right?
Off and
So
on?
obviously you're not going to see eye to eye all the time. Now, what
Nope.
is the key? Yeah. What is the key to longevity in a band to last as long as you guys have, in your personal experience or opinion?
Yeah, I can't speak for other bands, of course, but there's this weird kind of loyalty to Armored Saint, for better or worse. I think that we kind of started that when we were young. Granted, Gonzo, Phil, Joey, and we've known each other since we were like 9, 10 years old. We met Jeff when he was, playing clubs, and Odin was playing with Armored Saint, and I think he was like 17, and we were like 18, 19. So we've known him for a very long time too. I think there's a real loyalty to this to make it to kind of see it through. So even the times when you like going, "Argh," and I'm sure that's universal amongst all the guys. You say, okay, you get that kind of frustration, you let it go, and then you come back to the matter at hand, which is doing everything you can to keep the band going forward. So yeah, I think that's really important to us. And I I even tell the band, like, look, we can't really determine the success of things financially. You do your best. Of course, we want to do well. We want to sell a lot of records. We want to sell a lot of tickets, merchandise, you name it. But at the end of the day, you can't really control that. But what you can control is the quality of what you do. And it always comes back to that. So when you make a record, regardless of what it does, sells one record or sells, 50,000, whatever, it's you stand by it, and this is a great album. I'm really proud of it. And that's the best thing you can do. So it always comes back to that being the primary objective for us.
It's a good attitude.
Yeah.
Everybody basically with the same focus despite what's going on. Especially, you got things going on in your personal life and
Yeah.
your ups and downs, but you have to remain totally focused and dedicated. I could not imagine 40 years of being in the same band, same people.
Well, it's tough. It's not easy to do that. I mean, bands break up all the time. People leave bands. Usually it's, the difference of opinion musically and or personally, whatever it is. But it's hard because, you can get in a rehearsal or even on stage and play with somebody, but then, once the gig's over, then you have to actually, well, some bands don't even talk to each
Yeah.
other anymore, really, to be honest. And maybe that's better. But you know, it's you still have to coexist and that's the struggle sometimes. We're pretty good. Armored Saint, we our biggest problems is usually prior to records coming out, sending emails, people kind of misinterpreting what is said in an email or a text. It's like, what did you mean by
Happens
that?
all the
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
Right. So, but what
It's
the cool thing, actually, one of the better aspects of being around as long as we have is usually when we're on the road, we get along pretty well. Everybody kind of allows everybody to have their space, and that comes to being, we're veterans, so we know that, hey man, let's just kind of give each other space. We don't need to be in our drama all the time, and we know that the primary goal is to go out every night and kick butt and then chill and rest and kind of reset, if you will. And yeah, I think that part is pretty good. We really rarely have issues on the road together, which is a good thing. So we're lucky that way.
Yeah, so I got Hit a Moonshot on here. I
Moonshot.
want to talk
Yeah,
about that.
yeah, Moonshot's a great song. The new video, have you seen the video? It's
Oh
great.
yeah, I have
Yeah,
actually.
it's pretty
It's
funny. Shows a little sense of humor with Armored Saint. Lyrically, it definitely has that kind of feeling to it, where I'm playing a little bit on the fact that sometimes um, people can, no matter what they do in life, they seem to land on their feet. I don't know. Some people have a knack for doing that. No matter what kind of quandary they get themselves in, they always find a way to like, I come out of it smelling like roses. So I was laughing about that. Not pinpointing one particular person. It could be somebody it could be somebody who's in the public eye. But there's sometimes people that do that, and you're just like, man, that person, no matter what, gets through it and comes out successful. So I was finding a little sarcastic nod to that, but it was a fun video to make. Dave Brodsky and Ali, they directed it and they did an awesome job and showed, Armored Saint, you don't think of us as necessarily being this funny band. And that's but we definitely have that kind of element to us at times, and it was cool to demonstrate that. And I've been doing some boxing classes, so to be able to utilize that in a very, very premature or primitive way was still real fun.
Do you have any advice for aspiring musicians, John?
Yeah, I think the key thing for people, what I would always say is just, as we were talking earlier, is just listen to lots of different music, expose yourself to lots of things. Even if you come back to being, I'm a guy in a metal band or, I'm a guy in a country band or whatever it is, to always listen to lots of music, I think is really important because that'll kind of open your mind to being creative in different ways that maybe even ways you don't even know. So I think that's the important thing. Just like I would recommend that in all facets of life. I remember Scott Ian saying one time, I like all kinds of food. And, I don't like just listen. I don't only like certain food. So that's the way I feel about music. And I was like, ah, it's well put. It's true. The last thing you want to do is like eat burgers every day, or I only eat pasta. And it's like, what? It's like, there's so many amazing cuisines out there. Like, why would you only want to do that? Something I try to convince my son of. Um, so, you know, it, um, I think that's the most important thing. Listen to lots of music. That'll help you when it comes to being creative and writing and creating your own music. Sure, you could love metal, but you don't necessarily want to just only listen to metal because guess what? You'll probably start emulating some of that stuff that you're trying to kind of separate from a little bit. So I think that's the key thing. And then just be in it for the real reasons, and that is because you love it. And because when things get tough, you got to come back to remembering that that's why you wanted to do it in the first place, and not because, I mean, you could do it because you want to score chicks, that's fine too. There are perks, whatever. Um, that's just part of it. You can feel that way as
That's what
well,
it
but
usually starts out as.
yeah, but um, it's a hard business for sure. So, I mean, to get into it because you think that you can make a lot of money, the reality is that very few do. So that's if you're looking to get into a business to be financially successful, I would say music business is probably a debatable one, in all honesty.
Especially now.
Yeah.
Especially one last question here for you. What's your tour schedule look like coming up?
Yeah, so we got a couple shows coming up. We're doing a festival outside of Mexico City called the San Luis Fest. It's actually a couple hours out of Mexico City. That's actually next, like in 2 weeks. Then we're headlining the Rock Hard Festival in Gelsenkirchen, Germany, which is always a great show and it's connected with the magazine there, Rock Hard, and that's going to be a killer gig. And then we're going to Europe in late July, early August, doing a combination of festivals and some shows with Metal Church and Sabotage and
Wow.
Testament. So that should be really fun. And then, of course, festivals in Europe are always great too.
Yeah.
And then hopefully we're just about ready to announce a US. It's kind of a North American run, but it's only going to probably be in half the country because of the band we're playing with. I can't name it yet because I would get in trouble.
Yeah.
But we'll come out with that in the next couple of weeks, and that'll be really cool. It's a band from our era, and who has a new record out, and they have a great history themselves. So it'll be a cool tour, and anybody who's a metalhead, from 15 to 60, I think should come to this show because it'll be two really cool bands playing together. So, yeah, touring is really obviously a key component to what we do, and I can't wait to play a bunch of these songs live, these new ones.
It's awesome, John. Thank you so much for your time, man.
Thank you, John.
It's been
We'll see
valuable,
you out
man.
there on the road. Thanks for all the support.